Good evening and welcome to the Teen and Tween Cooking Challenge at Bridgman Public Library. We are joined tonight by the dynamic, the wonderful, and the amazing Mary Spencer, who is going to be guiding us through how to make Mediterranean style poached salmon. Mary, thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, kids, for joining us. And I wanted to do a fish dish today, and this is a really nice little fish dish. We're going to learn one technique that's called poaching. And I know a lot of you have probably heard about poached eggs. So basically, that's kind of a very, very basic type of poaching. And what poaching is essentially cooking something in a liquid. Can be any kind of a liquid. We're going to be using a combination of chicken stock and marinara sauce, and basically cooking it very, very gently in the liquid so that it kind of cooks all the way through and it retains its moisture. And that's the object of the game. You can pretty much poach anything. You can poach chicken, you can poach beef, you can poach eggs like we talked about. But in this case, we're going to poach some salmon, some fish. And just real simple to do. Now, I'm going to be using salmon today. You can really use any firm fish that holds its shape. And by that, I mean something like a cod. You can do an orange roughy would be good poached. I wouldn't do anything like a whitefish because that kind of gets really, really a little too soft and it starts to fall apart. But anything that's kind of a firmer fish would work really well for this. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to make a marinara sauce. And you can buy marinara sauce in the grocery store. And I know probably a lot of you have done that. What a marinara sauce is essentially a tomato sauce, typically used for pasta, but without meat. So it's a tomato sauce basically based on vegetables. So I'm going to show you how to do this, and I've got my burner going, and I'm going to get my little pot hot, just to, something that's deep enough to hold, maybe 2 cups of liquid. And I'm going to start off with some, I have some olive oil here. We're going to throw some olive oil in the pan, and I'll show you how this is how this is supposed to look as we kind of go along here. And the other thing that I'm going to also do is I'm going to show you how to skin some salmon. I have 2 salmon fillets, and typically when you're making fish for one person, you want to do maybe a 4-ounce piece, and each one of these is a 4-ounce piece of salmon. So I'm going to do 2 of them, and you can certainly cook it with the skin on. The skin is on the fish at the moment, but I'm going to take the skin off just because serving it then becomes very easy, and some people are kind of not real happy about having fish with the skin on. So I have here some chopped onion and some chopped garlic. We're going to throw that in our little pan here, and we're going to saute that until it kind of starts to get a little soft. And just let that kind of saute. Want to make sure that the garlic does not burn. That's a real important thing. All right, so to skin fish, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a nice sharp knife. You want to use a chef's knife. This is called a santoku knife. It has little dimples on each side, which helps to release anything that you slice. Sometimes when you slice a potato, it sticks to your knife, and the santoku will allow it to unstick, basically. So I have my fish here, and I'm going to put this on a cutting board of some kind. Any kind of cutting board works. And I'm going to take the thinnest end. So I have the very thin, and then this is the very plump end of the fish. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of hold that thin end down, and I'm going to take my knife, and I'm just going to kind of slip it underneath the actual fish, and I'm going to hold onto the skin with my other hand, keeping my fingers out of the way. And I'm just going to slide my knife under that piece of fish, and it pulls that skin right off. Okay, so there is the skin completely sliced off of the fish. We'll do the other fillet, and I want to show you guys how to season. So again, under the thin end of the fish, I'm just slipping my knife under, holding the skin with my other hand, and kind of at a 45-degree angle, I'm just pushing the knife along the skin, and that will remove the entire skin of the fish, okay? So really easy to do it that way. And we'll put that back here. I'm going to get rid of my little cutting board. And I'm going to show you guys how to season this. So I want to season this with some salt and pepper and, just simple seasoning, nothing too extravagant because all the flavor really is going to be in the poaching liquid. I have just some kosher salt. I have some pepper here. You always want to season everything really well. Make sure that you give everything a nice amount of flavor. We're going to flip it over. We'll season the other side. Real important to season both sides as you go. And then I have a little bit of pepper here as well. All right. So our fish is all ready to go as far as poaching it. And I am going to go ahead and kind of move this over. I will show you again how this sauce is starting to look. And I'm kind of sauteing those onions. They have gotten nice and soft. I am going to add some celery and some carrot to this. And we're going to just saute that for 1 second. Let that start to get a little soft. So basically I have my onions, my carrots, my celery in here. And then I also have a bay leaf, one little bay leaf. Bay leaf is going to add a little kind of a, like a woodsy taste to this. I don't really, to be honest with you, in all these years I've been cooking, it's really hard for me to try to figure out what a bay leaf does, but it honestly gives your finished dish a lot of flavor. So try not to forget the bay leaf if you can. So now that this is kind of ready to add my other ingredients, I've got some, I am using a little jar of tomato puree. Your recipe says that you can take fresh tomatoes, dice them up, throw them in here. You can take crushed tomatoes in a can, throw them in here. All of that will work. I'm just using what's called tomato puree, which is essentially tomatoes that have been crushed and then, just like really to a fine degree. So it's almost like a sauce. I'm going to pour my tomatoes in here. All right. And then we're going to let this cook. I'm going to actually rinse out my jar a little bit. And that will kind of add a little bit more liquid to my sauce. And we're good to go here. I'm going to give that a nice stir. All right, and then we're going to let this cook for maybe about 20 minutes or so until this sauce, and if you guys can see that right now, is kind of thin, okay? I'm going to make it nice and thick, and basically I'm going to show you what that should look like. So that sauce should turn into this sauce, and it should become pretty thick, almost like a pizza sauce or like a spaghetti sauce, okay? So that's how you want this sauce to end up being like, all right? And what that is our marinara. And you can use it. You can, if you only need a little bit of this, you can put the rest in the fridge and throw it on some pasta later on. You can really do a lot of things with it. You can put it on chicken. If you've sauteed some chicken and you want a little sauce to go with it, a marinara is really delicious. So, it's very versatile. You can use it for a lot of things. So now we're going to go ahead and do our poaching. And our poaching is going to be done in a little pan. I have just a little, kind of like a little wok type of pan, but you can use any saute pan that has a little bit of a higher side. So you don't want to use one that just has, a real small lip on it because you need to pour the liquid in here. You want something that has just a little bit of a higher side on it. So what I'm going to do is get my burner going again. All right, we're going to add a little olive oil to this, again, just like we did for the marinara sauce. And to that, we're going to add some shallots. I chopped one shallot and I chopped one clove of garlic. And you don't have to use a shallot. I like shallots with fish because they're kind of a little bit of a milder onion. A shallot is an onion that is about this big, tastes more like a sweet onion than like a regular onion. And I like them in things that are raw. I like them in sauces. I like them in vinaigrettes. I like them where I don't want that real sharp taste of an onion. You can also use a red onion if you prefer, like one of those, they call them red onions or purple onions. You can do that, and if you don't have any of that, you can certainly use just a regular cooking onion. That will work too. So I have my shallot and I have my garlic. I want to make sure that the oil is hot before I add both of those. All right, we're going to throw that in the sink. Gonna get that nice and sauteed just for a minute or so to kind of get those onions just a little soft. All right, and then what we're gonna do is I am going to add a little bit of red pepper flakes. We're doing a Mediterranean dish, and this is a dish that is done in like the southern part of Italy where they do a lot of tomato sauces and such. And when you do a southern Italian dish, a lot of times they will include red pepper flakes. And red pepper flakes are, they give you a tiny bit of heat depending on how much you use. And really, when you are using an ingredient like a chili pepper or red pepper flakes or something to that effect, you really want to make sure that you don't overdo it, especially if you're cooking for people who can't tolerate a lot of heat in their food. I just put a little bit, enough that it's going in, you know, your recipe tells you how much to add, and I think it's like about half a teaspoon or actually a quarter teaspoon. So not very much. You want to keep stirring the garlic so it doesn't burn, okay? And it's going to end up kind of looking and, you know, like it's kind of translucent, and that's where I want this to be. So I'm going to add my pepper flakes. You don't want to add the pepper flakes, you don't have to. But in Mediterranean cuisine, it's very, very common to see red pepper flakes added to a dish because it's hot in the Mediterranean. And when you eat something that's a little bit spicy, it kind of cools you off because it makes you sweat. So that's kind of the theory behind adding that. I'm going to add a little bit of white wine. You don't have to add the white wine. You can skip it all together. I'm going to add the white wine because I want to deglaze my pan. So maybe about a half a cup. And what does deglaze mean? It essentially means that anything that got stuck to the bottom of the pan by sauteing the onion and the garlic, the white wine has now picked it up off the bottom of the pan, and it's kind of creating almost like a sauce. So what I want to do here now, because I don't want that kind of alcohol taste that wine has, I want to make sure that I evaporate a lot of that wine. And to evaporate it, essentially what I have to do is to let it boil, okay? Let it boil and let it reduce. So you don't want to use wine, just add a little chicken broth and that will deglaze the pan. So you don't have to add the wine if you really, really don't want to or don't want to buy a bottle. What kind of wine do you use? Sometimes I just buy those little bottles that, your parents can buy a little bottle of wine at the grocery store. They sell them for like $1 a bottle, and that's enough for one recipe, and that works out. But again, don't use anything expensive. Don't go out in their wine cabinet and bring out something that's, real pricey. You want to use something kind of inexpensive, but that tastes good, okay? So the taste is always an issue. I'm going to use a little bit of chicken broth for this. You can use vegetable broth. You don't have to use chicken broth. And then I'm going to go ahead and just pour this right into my pan, just like that. All right. And we're going to let that kind of come to a little bit of a simmer. I'm going to add about a cup of this marinara sauce. Okay, so about a cup of that is going in. So I made half the recipe of the marinara sauce, and half of the recipe will make about 2 cups of marinara sauce. So you don't have to do a full recipe if you don't want to. You can just do a half, and that will work fine. When you are making the marinara sauce, please make sure that you remove the bay leaves. Don't leave that in there. Bay leaves are not something that you can really eat and swallow. They're only used for flavoring something. So when the bay leaf is done doing its job, you want to remove it from your food. And if you don't have bay leaves and you want to buy some and you want to try them, make sure that when you buy them whole. Some places buy them chopped, and the problem with that is they are so tough and sharp when you chop them. If they get left in your food and you swallow it, you could scratch your throat. So just make sure that you use whole bay leaves. Don't buy the ones that are chopped or sliced or diced ahead of time. Whole bay leaves are the way you want to go, okay? So this is now cooking. I'm going to kind of taste it a little bit, make sure that all the seasoning is here, because once I add my fish, it will season my fish. That is nice. I had enough salt in the stock, and then there was some salt after when I made the marinara. I seasoned the marinara with some salt and pepper as well. So I don't really need anything right now in this. This is pretty much ready to go, okay? So now to poach the fish. This is the part that people kind of get a little bit, it's a little tricky, but, just if you follow the kind of the rules, you don't have to worry about it. What I'm going to do is, this fish is kind of uneven in thickness, and typically when you're doing a fish fillet, it will be uneven. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tuck that thin part underneath the fish, and I'm going to take my fish and just slide it very gently without kind of getting in touch with the marinara into my sauce, okay? And what I want to do is I want to do it again, and I always want, whenever I'm adding anything to a liquid or oil or anything to that effect, I want to make sure that I do it away from myself. I don't put it like this and plop it down this way. I'm going to put it like this, and I'm going to plop it down that way, okay? What will happen once, because I've added that, I've put that piece of fish underneath the entire fillet, is that it will cook it more evenly. If I didn't do that, what will happen is that little thin piece will cook really quickly, and then the rest of the fish will take its time to cook, and then it'll be real tough on the thin end and then kind of maybe underdone on the thick end. So you want to be really careful with that. I'm going to turn the heat down just a little bit. When you are poaching something, you want to make sure that you just see little bubbles kind of floating to the surface of your dish. You don't want to see giant bubbles, and it boiling furiously, because a couple things will happen. First of all, if it's boiling furiously, it will make your food tough. So if I'm cooking the fish or I'm cooking a chicken breast or something to that extent, it will make it kind of tougher. The other thing is, if it's boiling really furiously, like, at a full rolling boil, what's going to happen is that because it's boiling so quickly and fish is a little more of a delicate piece of meat, it will start pulling that fish apart, especially if you remove the skin. Skin sometimes holds the fish together a little bit better, but again, it's not the most pleasant thing for some people to have it on there when you serve it. So if you take the skin off, make sure that that fish is just cooking very gently, in that poaching liquid, okay? So you don't want to make it pull apart. So now I have my fish, and it is cooking beautifully. You can kind of see starting to get opaque. And what I mean by opaque, it's not see-through anymore. It doesn't look raw anymore, okay? And that's going to take just a minute or so. Now, to serve with this, you could serve some rice. You could serve some noodles if you wanted to, like spaghetti noodles, do pasta, and then serve this over the sauce over the pasta, serve it over the rice. Really, it is your choice, whatever you want to do. I've just done this, and then I saute some squash on the side, and then I pour a little bit of the sauce on the squash, and then make sure you always pour a little bit of the sauce on the fish itself, because that's going to really make it taste good. All right, so let's take a look at this again. So salmon, fish like this, you kind of wanted to serve it a little underdone, not quite, so that it's like really white. Sometimes if people make fish, you overcook it a little bit, you might see like little white kind of foamy stuff that collects on the surface of the fish. And what that is the protein of the fish coming out, because you may have cooked it too long, or you may have kind of made that protein kind of reach the surface of the fish instead of staying inside. So, it's gonna kind of, even if you're poaching something, you could actually dry it out if you overcook it. So just be kind of careful with that. So I'm gonna switch to like a spatula. We're gonna use a spatula to pull this fish out. We're gonna move this over a little bit, and I'm gonna show you how this looks when it comes out. All right, so I've got my fish gently poaching. Again, if you see bigger bubbles in the liquid, turn it down, okay? And you want it just to kind of, I don't know if you've ever seen those little, those old-fashioned coffee percolators where, you get a little bloop once in a while of bubble that comes up. That's kind of what I want this to be like, okay? So we're going to look at this. We're going to pull one piece out, and we'll look at this. And I always like use another spatula to try to lift it, okay? So this needs just a little bit more time. I can see, because I can see the inside of it. All right, just be careful when you're using this. Don't pull the liquid towards you, because otherwise you'll splash yourself. just use care and caution when you're cooking, especially with hot liquids, because you don't want to hurt yourself, okay? I am going to just keep this going. If it's a smaller piece of fish, it will take a little less time to cook. So, depending on what kind of level of doneness you want on that fish, that's the amount of time that you actually cook it, okay? So I'm going to take a look at this other piece right now, because I have a feeling this one might be done. We'll pull this out, and I'm going to put this on my plate. And how do I tell if this is done? Basically, I'm going to take a knife, and maybe I'll take a little bit of a smaller knife, like a little paring knife. And I am just going to take the fish, and what I do is I lift it. I just give it a little lift, okay? And then it kind of naturally cracks. If you can see that, it naturally kind of like splits open. And what is happening there, I can see the inside. It's still a little raw on the inside, a little too raw for me. So I'm going to take it and put it back in the poaching liquid. Just handle it gently, and you should be absolutely fine. So we'll throw it back in the poaching liquid for a minute. And I just want that inside to get done. One of the things you don't want to do is take your knife and start poking in the top of the fish, because number one, it doesn't really look good. If somebody gets a piece of fish or something on their plate and it's got a big hole in the middle, it's not something somebody wants to really eat. You eat with your eyes as well as your, other senses. So just make sure that you don't you don't want to maul the food, in other words. Okay, if that makes sense, guys. Okay, so we're going to take this other piece out, and I'll look at it, and this is a little bit better. It's still a little bit underdone on the thicker side, so we'll let that cook just for another minute or so. All right, and then, so again, like I said, one of my favorite fishes to do is a cod. I like to do poach a fish that is a little flakier fish. So cod works really well with this. The salmon works really well. I stay away from really, really kind of delicate fish like trout or whitefish or things like that, because they don't hold up as well. It's not that they don't hold up in the poaching liquid, but when you go to eat them, they kind of start to get mushy because there's so little flesh on the fish. It just kind of mushes together when you poach it. You know what I mean? I prefer to do something like sauteing it. We'll maybe do that in another lesson in the future. So now I am ready with this. We're going to pull this out. All right, we'll pull this other one out too. We'll take a look at it. All right, so there is my salmon. Absolutely delicious, guys. I'm going to throw that in the sink. I'm going to take a little spoon, and I'm going to pour some of that sauce on. So if I look at that fish, it is nice and opaque in the center. I'm going to pull this, put some of that sauce on top, put some on the plate so people can kind of dip it as well. All right. And looks beautiful. So when you're serving something like this and if you kind of slop around the side of the plate, just take a towel, a dry towel, or it could be a little bit wet, and then just go around the edge of the plate. Because like I said, you want to make sure that, whatever you cook looks nice too, other than just tasting good. So you want to really make sure that it has a good appearance as well as a good flavor. Okay. So there is my Mediterranean style poached salmon. Real easy to do. This sauce, again, you could, even after you've poached the fish in it, you can toss it with some pasta and it would be absolutely delicious. So good luck, guys, and hope to see you next time. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Mary, for coming out. It was wonderful to have you, and that looks delicious. And I look forward to all of the submissions that are going to be here. Thank you from the Bridgman Public Library. Kyle.